Okay, so India today because we've got to I. I'm going to tell you now, India's huge, like really big, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So I've tried to pick stuff today that is particularly interesting, but I'm really only going to scratch the surface. Just like normal, in uh, in our Geography Tuesdays, we're going to have a look at the physical shape of India and have a little look at something interesting that happens with physical geography. We're then going to have a look at some wildlife. We're going to have a look at the government. We're going to have a look at the development, everyone's favorite bit, GDP per capita. Oh yeah. We're then going to have a look at culture, and my goodness, is there a lot of culture to look at in India. So let's get going and see where we end up. Now, India on our map is here. One of the reasons why it's very difficult to talk about India in just one little solitary hour is because it's essentially a subcontinent all of its own. It is absolutely huge, the second most populated country in the world. Over 1 billion people live there. So if you add India and China, that's over 2 billion people. There's less than 8 billion people on the planet. You can see that a lot of people are living in these areas. Now, let's go straight to physical and look at a bit more detail at our map. I thought today we would have a look at some of the climate zones and a nice phenomena that we get in India. Here we are. Ooh, hang on. MB Shadow Girl, please do not fill the chat because I cannot see if anyone's asking questions. Now, so our main climate zones for India here, we have over here in the east of the, in the west of the country, sorry, we have hot, dry area. Very, very warm, very, very dry, a bit desertous for sure. Fingersnail asks, are we going to mention the Taj Mahal? I believe we will, yes. So hot and dry down there. Now, if we go further to the east, this great big sort of light browny color here, this is a composite of hot and cold. So it's kind of, maybe we'd be used to it if you live in the UK. Maybe you'd be used to the temperatures here roughly, still a bit warmer than the UK, but can be warm, can be cold, a bit more seasonal. If we go down south, though, for most of the south, it is very warm and very humid. We're talking jungles. We're talking monsoon seasons, which we're going to have a look at in a second. That's our little picture on the side here. Oh, there we go. We've also got areas that are quite temperate, so little pockets down here in the sort of central south. And then there are cold points, which show us either highland or as we go up here into Kashmir, we're entering the Himalayas. So it actually gets very cold. The altitude soars and the temperature goes down. Yes. So it's a huge country. So it has loads of different climates. People living down in the south in Tamil Nadu would have a very different kind of environment to the people living higher in the north in Kashmir, just because the temperature is so very different. Shadow Henchman is saying they went on a trip to Himachal Pradesh. Excellent. Is that? Where's that? I don't even know where that is. Oh, over here. Is that? Oh, I can't even read it. We're talking the north, though, I think. Now, one of the interesting things about India and this part of the world in general, it's not just India, is something called the monsoon season. Now, in countries like the UK, we have 4 seasons. That's what people are used to generally: spring, summer, autumn, winter. In lots of parts of the world, it doesn't work like that. Yeah, that's very much a seasonal balance that is kept, in our part of the world. In India, or at least in southern India especially, we have something quite different, which is dry season followed by a monsoon season. There you go. A good question. GR4 Tornado says, if I lived in India, where would I live? Oh, I think I'd go down in the south in the warm to chill out with Shadow Henchman, I reckon. That's where I'd go. Although I'd very much like to visit Kashmir up in the north there. A bit dangerous, but fun. So we can see some photos here of children in the monsoon rains, because what happens is in parts of India where we get the monsoon, you get dry, dry, dry for a long time, and then it rains for a few months really hard. And so we can see that the rains here have caused flooding. These children are going to school in the monsoon floods. But the monsoon isn't necessarily a negative thing. It can be dangerous if it floods, of course. People can be hurt or killed. But for a lot of people, the monsoon is really important, because if you're a farmer and you've been waiting for that rain all year, when it comes, it's going to be a time of celebration for sure. A question here from Bellatrix Lestrange. Don't trust you. How many earthquakes does India have a year? They do have a lot of earthquakes. I don't know exactly how many. Yeah, lots. I don't know. And someone's asking me to spell monsoon. Let's get my pen out here. Monsoon. Yeah, it's a fine word to say. Monsoon. Baboon in the monsoon. Satisfying. Now let's just have a look at how this rainfall works over here. I've got two graphs here, or charts, I should say. One which is for Pondicherry, down in the very, very south of India, and one that is for London, which is in the UK, if you weren't sure. And so we're going to compare our rainfall from these two. Oh, Puddles, Gem, and Matilda, I cannot go back to the biomes right now, but please do watch back later if you want to see them again, only because we've got so much to get through today that I cannot hang around on the maps. I'm all aflutter. Yes, it will be. You can come back and watch this again. It will be in the folder as normal, so you can watch. Now, the recorded lessons are in a folder. You can get there via Facebook. Also, if you wait a few days, they will pop up on YouTube. My wife is putting them all up there, so people can watch them back. So there you go. Yeah. So we can see here that the rainfall down in Pondicherry in India is quite low, very low in January, February, March, April. Starts to get a little bit more in May, a little bit, but not so much. But then when it comes to July, it starts to get more rainy. And by the time it hits November, it is crazy rainy. This is like an average year. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Now, if we compare that with London, so, somewhere in the UK, the rainfall in London is pretty standard all year round. We have slightly drier months, we have slightly wetter months, but really, if you notice the numbers here, we come up to about 80 millimeters is the most you will get in any one month in London. Now, 80 millimeters is less than the July rainfall in Pondicherry. So if our 80 millimeter line is about here, roughly, here I'm trying to draw my line, there we go. That's about as wet as it gets in London. As we can see, during November, down in the south of India, it gets quite a lot wetter, much, much wetter indeed. So that's what we call the monsoon, when the rains come down. Now, I did also find, just randomly, let me see, another chart here which shows, and this is across India, not just in Pondicherry, but this shows us the correlation, or at least the connection, between snake attacks and the rain. It would seem that in monsoon season, so September to November here, this is averaging out over India, we can see this red line shows how many people are bitten by snakes. And as the rains come, the people get bitten more. In very rainy years, the people get bitten more. Now, I haven't had time to research why snakes come out in the rain so much, but maybe it's because they're all floating around. Maybe they're pushed out of their homes by all the rainwater, and they end up going into people's houses and giving them a bite. That's what I imagine. But like I say, I haven't researched it. So maybe you've got a better idea as to why snakes come out in the rain. Maybe they just like little umbrellas, and they just walk around in their umbrellas biting people. I don't know. Zaya, please do stop pressing the buttons, just so that I can keep an eye on the questions. Thank you. All right, let's go over here. Let's have a look at some of the wildlife. So India's national animal is this a beautiful creature here. This is a Bengal tiger. Really, really beautiful creature. Quite dangerous, of course. You wouldn't want to keep one as a pet. Although, as a lot of you probably know right now, there are more tigers kept in captivity in America, in the USA, than there are in the wild in the entire world. So, there aren't many wild tigers either, but there aren't many wild tigers left in India, sadly. But this Bengal tiger is a nice example. And it's the national animal of India because it shows, I suppose, strength and beauty and grace. And, who wouldn't want such a beautiful creature to be their national animal? It must be similar to the reason why we have a lion, I guess, in the UK. Alfred would like a pet tiger. Not very safe, Alfred. I mean, tiger could eat you, would eat you really quickly. Oh, that's a finger snail is saying that a tiger is better than the chicken of France. I mean, yeah, you're right. Okay, I mean, I could try and argue the case for the chicken of France, but that tiger is better. It just is. Yeah. A Bengal tiger, Captain Toad, to be precise. Yes. Now we've got another. You can see it written here. Here's a picture that I found, just a collection of Indian animals, because I thought, wow, I could grab photos of Indian animals all day, but here we've got some good ones. So there's Indian rhinos. We've got mongoose. Oh yes, who roam around. They're good at fighting snakes. They are. We've got this beautiful bird with blue wings called the Indian roller, and the Indian gaur. I'm not sure how you say that, but yeah, big wild cow. We've got muntjac deer. We've got a peacock here. We've got a star tortoise. Ooh, very cute. We've got a gharial. Looks like some kind of crocodile beastie. We've got a Bengal tiger, like we just saw. Indian leopard, the Indian cobra, which is actually India's one of the only countries that I know of that has a national reptile. Most countries have like a national animal. Some have an animal and a bird. Yeah. India has a reptile, which is the cobra. There you go. We've got the lion-tailed macaque here, and we've got the Asiatic lion, and do not forget the Asian elephant, often known as the Indian elephant. Yeah. Luna Lovegood, yes. The tiger does represent India in a way. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at these national animals. Each country picks an animal that represents it best. So, France had the chicken of France. England has a lion. Scotland has a unicorn. Wales has a dragon. And India has the Bengal tiger. So there you go. Now, let's have a look. Oh, and of course, the Danish protest pig was not the national animal of Denmark, but it is a fine animal. Yeah. Here we've got a representation of a sacred cow as well. So in India, at least amongst the Hindu population, cows are not quite sacred. People say the word sacred. It's not quite that. I mean, if you dig down into the philosophy behind it, but they are very well respected animals, and they are supposed to be looked after, and in some cases revered. Not quite sacred though. Now, this particular cow has been dressed up and painted for a Hindu festival. So I'm going to say she has marks all over her. She's got her horns have been painted. She's got a peacock feather headdress here, which is all the rage amongst the cow fashions nowadays. I mean, she's got her handprints on her and these like lotus blossoms. I imagine these are supposed to be here. And then we've got Lord Krishna playing his flute, painted on her side. So, and bells on her feet, of course. Don't forget bells on the feet there. Pretty sweet. So, yeah, lots and lots of cows in India. But lots of animals in general. If you've ever seen or read The Jungle Book, The Jungle Book with Mowgli, you know the one, that's set in India. So pretty much all the creatures in there are Indian animals. Of course, the bad guy in that is Shere Khan, the tiger, which is our national animal here. Yeah, there are wolves. That's right, Ghost Henchman, yeah. Yes. So, oh dear, Josh is quite angry that I've been dissing the chicken of France. I'm sorry, Josh. I mean, I like the chicken of France. I think he's great. I'm just not, he's not a tiger. That's all I'm saying. Of course, Shere Henchman, there are lots of different kinds of monkeys living in India too, yes. And of course, we could do a whole hour on just the insects and the birds of India, but yeah, we will go on to our government. Now, at the moment, India is led by the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, who is this gentleman here. Now, he's quite an interesting leader. If you keep a half an ear on the news coming out of India, he's always doing something interesting. Maybe not always great, but definitely interesting. Not long after he took power the last time round, he just decided one day to ban a whole load of banknotes, just get rid of all the 50 rupee notes, I think it was, or maybe the 500s. And He just said that, no, this money isn't legal anymore, and it all just went away, which caused great chaos in a country of 1 billion people. Now, India gets to have the honor of being the largest democracy on the planet, probably in the universe, who knows. With over 1 billion people, all those people have to go and vote. It takes about a month. There was an election last year. It took 30 odd days for everyone in the country to vote. You know, to give you some idea, in the UK, we vote on one day, on a Thursday, every time. In India, 30 days, because there are so many people that need to go and tick the boxes for who they want. And it was this guy, Narendra Modi, who won. A good question there. Peely asks, would the tiger of India beat the chicken of France? It depends what the competition was, Peely. If the competition was a straight up fight, then yes, the tiger would win. But if the contest was like crowing the loudest, I reckon the chicken of France has got it. So, you know, we gotta define the terms before we start deciding which is best. I mean, other than obviously that the tiger is best. So Narendra Modi came to power with a great upswell of votes, but he has caused some issues in the last year. He is causing some issues at the moment. And I've picked a couple of those to talk about here. He is incredibly popular, it has to be said, but he is mainly popular amongst the Hindu members of India, which is the majority. But there are lots of other religions, as we'll see in the culture section. Now, back in February, Donald Trump, Prime Minister of America, yeah, love it, love it. He came over to India and he met Narendra Modi and gave some speeches. And as that happened, a lot of Muslim people, who are another big religious group in India, they came out to protest against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has made it very hard and, in fact, impossible for some Muslims from some countries to come to America. Yeah, which everyone sees as unfair, or at least Muslims see it as unfair, and most other people, but not everyone. I'm sure Donald Trump thinks it's fine. Now, they started to protest, you know, they walking around with flags and banners going, "Oi, stop it, you bad Trump," that kind of thing. But that ended up in a full-scale riot, because the Muslim people were attacked by the Hindu people, and, well, this is a photo of the outcome of that particular thing. Fire in the streets. Over 40 people were killed in February on the streets of New Delhi, this city behind me, in this riot. And it seems that those riots are becoming more frequent. And some people point to Mr. Modi and say, well, it's your fault, Mr. Modi, because you're not being fair, you're not being equal. You are being nicer to the Hindus than you are the Muslims, and you're asking for trouble. So, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that develops, hopefully without much more violence. Now, also, Mr. Modi has started something quite spectacular. This picture here was taken this month, and this is a picture of migrant workers. Now, in India, millions of people, yeah, because it's a country of billions, remember, but millions of people work in rather poor jobs a long, long way from their homes. Okay, so it's very common for, and you'll notice that this picture is pretty much all men. I can't see any women in here. Because the men of traditional families, they might leave their homes in the countryside, and they will go to places where there are big factories where they can work. And often those are in, you know, more developed parts of India, so they might go to the big cities and things. Now, this is quite normal for India, happens all the time. You know, millions of men working away from their families just to earn a living, to send it back home, to help out their wives and children or whatever. But this caused a bit of a problem, because when Mr. Modi said that the country was going on lockdown, just like the UK is at the moment, he said, right, everyone get back to your homes. And what do you do if you're living 1,000 miles away from your home and you're a poor person and all the buses have stopped and all the trains have stopped? Well, you've got to get walking, and you've got to walk a long, long way. So we had millions, and of course there are still millions, of stranded migrant workers who can't stay where they are because their jobs have been shut. They need to get home, but they can't because they're too poor and all the transport has stopped. And so we have millions of men just wandering around trying to find food and shelter and all this kind of stuff. A bit of a disaster. Now, some people say this could have been avoided a little bit, because in most countries, like in Britain and America, the leaders say, right, we're going on lockdown in a few days. Yeah, you've got a few days to get ready. Prime Minister Modi gave 3 hours. He said, right, within 3 hours, everyone needs to be locked down. Get in your houses now. So that caused a bit of a problem, especially if you live 1,000 miles away from your home. 3 hours is not going to get you there. Not unless you're a very good runner, like Sonic the Hedgehog. But I don't think these people are. Oh, GR4 Tornado says there is one woman. Oh, let's see. It's like, where's Wally, isn't it? Oh, yes, I see. Haha, found her. Very good. There we go. Yeah. All right. So, yes, the government, the biggest democracy in the world, led by Narendra Modi at the moment. Now, let's see, where does it fit? This is the bit that we've all been waiting for. The GDP per capita. Woo! So, if you're not sure, and I say it every time, but hey, who knows who's new today? The GDP per capita is where we take all the money that a country makes, all the jobs, all the people, all the money, we put it into a great big pot, and then we divide it out amongst the people in that country. So with India, there's actually quite a lot of money made. There are some incredibly rich people, as we'll see in a minute. But there are also a lot of people to divide that by. Yeah, if we've got over 1 billion people, whatever pot of money we've got has to be divided by that for this particular statistic. So that puts India quite low down our list. We've got at the bottom is still poor old Ethiopia, with Haiti just ahead, but not by much. India is not much ahead of that. Because we've got such a huge population and so many people are living in poverty. So to look at that in a dollar term, in Britain, the average person earns $42,943 a year if we were to divide it up. In India, it's only $2,000 a year, so quite a lot different. I mean, we can see our forerunner is still Denmark, way ahead in the lead there. So yeah, there's a big disparity between the amount of money for people in India and the amount of money for people in Denmark. But that doesn't mean that everyone in India is poor. Quite the opposite. Because India is home to quite a few billionaires. And in fact, this gentleman here is the richest at the moment. Mukesh Ambani. He's a businessman, as you can probably tell from his natty tie and his big grin. And he has $53 billion. $53 billion. To put that into perspective, I mean, just, that's a lot of money, basically. It's more than I've got by quite some way. To put it into some kind of perspective, though, Haiti, the entire country, has $20 billion in it. Yeah, that's everyone. That's the prime minister, that's the president, that's all the people. If you share out all their money, between them, they have 20 billion. This guy has 53 billion. He could buy Haiti twice and still have room for, I don't know, Mozambique, roughly. Yeah, 2 Haitis and a Mozambique. Yeah, he could do that. So yeah, not everyone in India is poor. Some people are incredibly rich. So this means that there's a big disparity. Sometimes when we look at our GDP per capita, it's an imaginary number because we don't really divide up all the money fairly between people, do we? What we do is some people have loads and some people have none. So although Mr. Ambani here is incredibly rich, unfortunately, that doesn't work for everyone, as we'll see in a second. Peely asked an interesting question. Does the chicken of France have more money than him? Well, yes. I mean, France as a country has more money than him. I'm not sure how much they give to the chicken, though. Part of me thinks that the chicken of France is above money, He doesn't care about money and things. He just wants to be outside in, I don't know, the streets of Paris, scratching at the ground and catching worms. He's that kind of guy, He's quite relaxed about the whole thing. Now, here we've got some statistics just to show up a little bit of poverty in India. So here we've got some numbers and some figures about how many people are poor in India. And by poor in this sense, we're meaning really poor. We're looking at around people who are earning about $1.9 a day, which isn't very much. These are people who are just about surviving on basic food. And there are 270 million of them. Just let that sink in for a second. 270 million poor people. That's a lot of people. Now, you could say that maybe if our businessman gave all these people some money, they wouldn't be poor anymore. But I don't even know if he's got enough really to even it all up for everyone. 1 in 5 Indians is in poverty, so that's or poor, as I put here. So that's 20% of all people in India are poor, and most of those, 8 out of 10, as we can see on our little graph down here with our little people. 80% of them live in rural areas, which means they live in the countryside. The richer people live in the cities, the poorer people live in the countryside. And so that means that there's a big difference. If you were to go to India and roam from the countryside into the cities, you would see a lot of difference. Now, you would still see lots of poor people living in the cities too, don't get me wrong. There are shanty towns and things built up around all the major cities, high levels of poverty. But really, the poorest people are those who live out in the countryside with little access to things like broadband or electricity, important stuff like that. Is there a country where everyone have loads of money? That's a good question, GR4 Tornado. As far as I'm aware, there are definitely. I'm not sure if this still happens, but Oman used to do something called UBI, Universal Basic Income, which meant that everyone had at least £30,000 a year. I don't know if they still do that, though. Maybe when we get to O, I will do Oman, and I'll have to look into that. That information is from a fair few years ago. So quite possibly, but yes, there are some countries where, Sweden, places like that, people are generally well off. I mean, in Britain, most people are pretty well off. We do have homeless people who have very little to nothing. But even the poorest people in Britain are rich compared to the poorest people in India. Yeah. I mean, every country has some kind of poverty because we work it out often on how many people are living below the average amount of money earned. So if you're living in a country where everyone earns $1 million every day and you don't, that can put you into poverty technically, even if you're really rich. Yeah. So, good question though. I think when we get to the Middle East, we'll start to see some really rich countries with some rich populations. Okay. So our economic development, India, a mixed bag, very poor, very rich. Now this does lead to some problems. In recent years, the British government has had some debates and arguments about how we should deal with India, because we give, or I say we, the British government gives millions and millions of dollars to India every year, or millions of pounds, to help out the poor people. But at the same time, we have really, really rich people in the country. So some people say, well, hang on, Britain shouldn't be giving them any money because if we do, then maybe the rich people are going to take it. Maybe the rich people should be helping out the poor people, but it doesn't really work like that. So it's a really tricky one. As of now, we are still helping India with money, and you'll probably see why when we get to the culture section in a minute. Jasper asks, could we do J for Jerusalem? Jerusalem is in Israel, which we could have done today if we hadn't done India. It's the I's. I'm telling you, Israel, India, Iran. I mean, 3 brilliant countries that we could have done. Maybe we should just triple down on the I's for a bit. I don't know. We'll see. There's a lot of alphabet to get to yet, though. So yes, unfortunately, we're not going to do a whole lesson on Jerusalem because it's a city, not a country. That's all. Oh dear. And Iceland, of course. Yes, we could have done Iceland too. So many I's. And Indonesia, of course. Indonesia is another huge country in Asia, which we're just going to have to skip over because of India. Okay. So, hello, Bengal Tiger again. Let's go and have a look at culture. Now, I've tried to save as much time as possible for culture because, well, there's a lot of culture to go for. Now, we'll start with probably the most well-known building in India, which is also going to start us to understand a little bit of the history of India here. Now, India is home, like the birthplace of three of the world's major religions. And this building isn't from any of them. There you go. This building is a Muslim building, an Islamic building, which was built by Shah Jahan, this guy that we can see here in his very cool shoes. I do like them. They're very red. Oh, that's a really good question, Phoebe. Is India a developing country? No, it's an emerging country. Although if you went to lots of the countryside, it would be exactly the same as a developing country. It's a weird one. It's difficult to put them into these categories, but because India has so many factories and there are so many people getting richer and richer all the time, then it's emerging. And hopefully, the idea is that as it emerges into the richer countries' territories, then all those poor people will be given, what they need. That's the idea. It just hasn't happened yet. So yeah, parts of it are the same as a developing country, but as a country in general, it's an emerging country. There you go. Yeah, really good question. Ella has been here to the Taj Mahal. That's very cool. Um, now, the Mughals were a group of people who ruled over India between the years 1526 and 1857, sort of. More on that in a minute. The original Mughals, they came from Persia, so we're talking Iran, Afghanistan, I believe was their capital, and they came down. A guy called Babar, he conquered India, or most of it, and his sons and descendants took over the rest, and they formed this amazing empire called the Mughal Empire. Now, it was a bit of a turbulent time, at least the beginning, of course, because India is the home to mainly Hindu people, and the Mughals were Muslims. So the two people, they kind of mixed and merged, and I'm not going to say it was perfect because it certainly wasn't, but some of the Mughal emperors were kind to the Hindus, some not quite so much so, and there was a balance that kept on shifting. But generally speaking, the two groups got on pretty well. And so the country was ruled by Muslims for, what we got, 15, 16, 17, 18, 300 odd years, yeah? Um, and during that time, some of the most iconic buildings were built. Now, Shah Jahan, he built the Taj Mahal as a tomb, what we call a mausoleum, for his favorite wife who had died, the one that he loved the most. She died and he could not bear it. He was so sad. He had this amazing tomb built. It is absolutely huge. It is absolutely perfectly symmetrical, as you can see, which adds to its beauty. Oh, good question there. GR4 Tornado. Are there Jewish people in India? There are some. Yeah, there's Christians, there's Jews. Not in only small amounts, though. Yeah, I mean, the two main religious groups are Muslims and Hindus. Although, as we'll see, that power balance has shifted as well. So this goes down in history as possibly one of the best buildings ever made. I mean, modern architects still go and marvel at it, at the ways that it was built. The whole thing is covered in white marble, which is incredibly expensive and incredibly difficult to work with. So yeah, quite impressive. Grace says she thought it was a palace. No, it's a tomb. I mean, a very, very pretty tomb. But yes, a tomb it is. Yeah, so his dead wife was placed here after, and he would go there and remember her, I guess. Yeah. How do you spell his name? Shah Jahan. It's here on the screen. If you can't see it, I'll just move the screen up a little bit. Shah Jahan, that's who made it. One of the Mughal emperors. And the Mughals are famous for their art and their sort of culture and their style, and also, bringing this mix together of Islam and Hinduism. But like I say, that's not one of the three religions that started in India. It's a huge religion in India for sure, but it didn't start in India. Islam started in Saudi Arabia. No, there's three more religions to have a look at yet. So I'm going to swoop to the side here. Now, one of those religions is Buddhism. Now, here is Siddhartha Gautama. In fact, we'll have to do the story of Siddhartha Gautama at some point in mythology, maybe. Fingersnail asks, is his wife's skeleton still there? As far as I know, I assume so. I assume she's still buried. I can't think why they would have moved her, but I honestly don't know. That's something that we could look up, isn't it? Yeah. How do you spell the temple? Let me just put that up here. Taj Mahal. Is that it? Yeah, looks about right. Can you go inside? Yeah, loads of tourists go every year to look around and gaze in awe at the great temple there. Not temple, tomb, mausoleum. Yeah. And the religion is Islam. Now, this religion here, this is going to get confusing because I've just written it there. Islam goes with the Taj Mahal. This guy, though, he is not a Muslim. He is the first Buddhist. In fact, he is the Buddha. His real name, Siddhartha Gautama, he was a prince who grew up in luxury. But then he left his life of happiness and luxury to go and instead explore the world of, pain and suffering, I suppose. Gets a bit grim. But after a while, he realizes that pain and suffering is no good either. He's lived a life of luxury as a prince, fed grapes by pretty women all day. Yeah. He's lived a life of extreme pain, and he really did hurt himself a lot. until he finally sits down underneath a tree to die, and he gets into a state of meditation, and all of a sudden, as shown here by this glow behind his head, he realizes and understands everything. He is enlightened. He reaches nirvana, and he then stands back up and he wanders around India teaching people about his methods for finding inner peace and for transcending the mortal frame. Which means, long story short, that he's that cool Buddha guy that you see, with the bald head and the big smile. Yeah. Um, there you are. So Buddhism, one religion that started in India, but not even the first one. I mean, Siddhartha, he would have been a Hindu to start with, but then he made his own religion, Buddhism. The first religion to come out of India that we know of. And we looked at a bit of this when we did the story of Rama and Sita, if you were there for that. But Hinduism is the biggest religion in India. Oh, hang on. There we go. Hinduism is a huge religion. Zaya, please do stop pressing the keys because I don't want to miss any questions again. Thank you. It is a polytheistic religion, which means it has loads of different gods and goddesses. I've put some of the most, well, I put the three most important ones up here, and Ganesha, just because he's the coolest. But here we have something that's called the Trimurti. Or if I was going to say it in a proper Indian way, I would roll my R, so the Trimurti, something like that. Now, the Trimurti are the three main and most important gods of Hinduism. Some of them are worshipped by different groups of Hindus at different times. There are some Hindus who will spend all their time worshipping just Shiva or just Vishnu, yeah. Whereas there are other groups of Hindus who will pray to them all equally. There are some Hindus who will just pray to Ganesha or will pray to Hanuman, the monkey god of strength, all this kind of stuff. I've heard a Hindu tell me once that there are as many different types of Hinduism as there are Hindus, because it's not that kind of religion where there are laws or rules, particularly. I mean, individual Hindus will have their rules and laws, but a Hindu from one village might have a completely different idea about the religion than a Hindu from another one. Yeah, you might have a different idea about the religion than your dad or your mum does. Yeah, so it's one of these beautiful religions. In fact, the word Hinduism was made up by British people. It's not really something that comes from India at all. I suppose they would just call it religion. Yeah. But our three main gods are Brahman, the creator, or Brahma, sorry, the creator. Now, he made the world, and he, on this particular image, has multiple heads so that he can keep an eye on everything around him. A bit like when we saw Ravana, that 10-headed demon, although this guy is not a demon. Now, he's not openly worshipped so much, Brahma, although some Hindus, they do see him as the ultimate reality. He's not quite as popular because he's not quite as active in the stories. He made the world and then he kind of went away. He's the creator. Yeah. Jasper says his family isn't religious. No, I didn't mean that your families would necessarily be Hindus. It was just an example, really. But yes. Jasper cannot even remember the Lord's Prayer. Don't worry, I can remember it for you. All right, then we've got so we've got Brahma, then we have Shiva at the other end here, the destroyer. Now, Shiva dances the dance of death and destruction, in some ways quite dark, the opposite to the creator. All things must end, and it is Shiva that brings that end about, through the dance of death and destruction. Quite grim, but also kind of important, of course. So there are many Hindus who will worship Shiva as the main god. And in the middle, we have Vishnu. Vishnu, who we saw in our story of the Ramayana as Rama himself, the blue skin here. And he is the preserver. He's the one that keeps things going in the middle. So we've got the creator, we've got the destroyer, and we've got the preserver, the looker afterer, if you want to put it in a different way. So he looks after the things that are here. He tries to stave off Shiva and take what Brahma's made and keep it good, yeah? How do we spell these? Okay, so let me write these up here. So we've got Brahma, then we have Vishnu. Some of these also have like alternative spellings, but these are probably the most, in the English spellings anyway. Shiva, there you are. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, creating, protecting, or preserving, and destroying. Um, yeah, and who is Ganesha? There's our next one. So Ganesha here. Oh, is Shiva a girl? No, these are all boys, although they do all have wives, so, or consorts we call them. So, and there are just as many goddesses as gods, but no, the three main ones are male. Traditional Indian art often shows men as not, as being quite, I wouldn't quite say androgynous, but they're not like big hulking bearded beasties. They're often quite feminine in their features and stuff. Yeah, that's quite normal. So Ganesha here, he is one of my favorite gods. I mean, yes, he has an elephant head, which is super cool. I mean, let's just get that out of the way right now. He also is the god of some of my favorite things. So he's the god of removing obstacles, or he can be. I used to have, thanks to Shadow Henchman, I used to have a picture of Ganesha on my bike that I would ride around to try and keep the obstacles out of my way. And it helped. It worked. I never did crash into anything. Thank you, Ganesha. He's also associated with education. So he's the god of students and teachers. So that works with me pretty well. And he's also a god of luck and wealth in some ways too. So all round, he's a pretty good guy to have as a god. Now, there are loads of different stories about how he got his elephant head, but the stories, they do tend to agree that he wasn't born that way. As you can see, our gods have human heads usually. Yeah. Now, his head, according to one story, my favorite one, he was there one day walking through the forest, and his mother, another goddess, she was in the river having a wash with no clothes on, and she hears a rustling in the branches, and out pops Ganesha's head, but she doesn't realize it's Ganesha. She's like shocked. Somebody's spying on her while she's having a bath. That's disgusting. And so she turns around and chops off his head. Straight off. Oh no. Now she has a son with no head. Poor Ganesha. Now, Ganesha's dad comes along and says, "Oi, what's going on here? Why is my son missing one head?" And she says, "Oh, it was an accident." And he says, "Okay, well, we'll take the first head that we find in the forest. And of course, what should walk by but a great big effalump?" So off comes the head of the elephant onto the body of Ganesha, and voila, you have an elephant-headed god. Quite a cool story, I suppose. Poor old Ganesha. I think he likes it though. I think he can get quite a lot of stuff done with that trunk, If you just imagine for a second, what would you do with a trunk? Loads of stuff. So, you could like steal people's sweets, couldn't you? They're eating a bag of sweets. You just reach out your nose, pick them up. There you go. Poor Ganesha. Let me see. Some people are saying I'm freezing again. Let me see if I can turn my camera off and on. This might help. There we are. Indian Nature asks, "Am I a teacher?" Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Yes, it could just be their internet. This is true. Bellatrix Lestrange has read 5 books all at once. That's pretty cool. If you had a trunk, maybe you could read even more, because you could hold one in each hand, one in each foot, and one in your trunk, couldn't you? And then rest one sort of like on your knees, maybe. Um, yeah, you could. This is good, Lewis. You could juggle with that trunk, couldn't you? You could get, yeah, definitely. I mean, the possibilities are endless. I mean, I think overall he benefited from this. Now here we have a building to represent another one of the major world religions which comes from India, and this is the Golden Temple. And this is the Golden Temple of the Sikh people. Now, Sikhs is a religion which is a relative baby religion compared to some of the other religions on earth, anyway, especially compared to Hinduism. But Sikhism was created by a man called Guru Nanak, who he lived in an interesting community. He lived at a time when Muslims and Hindus were not getting on. The Mughal emperor is in charge, and there's Hindus all around the place. And he connected with God, according to the stories. There's lots of cool stories about Guru Nanak and the cool things he did. But according to Sikhs, he brings together Hindus and Muslims. Some of his followers were Muslim, some were Hindu, and he kind of makes this new religion, a bit of a combination of the two. It's similar to Hinduism, but it's also similar to Islam. There's only one God, unlike in Hinduism, but most of his followers were Hindus, so it all sort of comes together. And one of the beautiful things about Sikhism, I mean, there's lots of beautiful things about Sikhism, as there are the other religions, but one of the beautiful things is that they don't care what you call God. You can call him Vishnu or Shiva or Allah or God. It doesn't matter, because it's all the same to them. You know, there is one God, and you know, you can call him what you like. You can draw whatever pictures you want of him. Doesn't really matter. He can be a girl called Sarah if you want to. You know, whatever. So Sikhism is our third major world religion. So 3 world religions were born there: Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism. Plus, we've got loads of Islam. There are also other religions there. We looked, when we looked at the Tales of Zarathustra, at Zoroastrianism, and one of the biggest populations of Zoroastrians in the world is in India. So, you know, and loads of Christians, Jewish people, you know, you name it. There's also other groups called Jains and things like that. So there we go. Dum dum, I'm talking to myself. Okay. Oh, can I write Sikhs? Yes. There we are, like that. So all in all, yeah, yeah, got it pretty close there, Shelley. Not bad. Okay. Now, we couldn't really talk about India without mentioning the fact that it was ruled over by Britain for hundreds of years. Now, I said that the Mughal Empire rolls on into the mid 1800s, but it didn't really. The last Mughal emperor was basically a prisoner. He was forced to live in quite a nice house, but in a very small part of New Delhi, behind me here. And eventually he was sent away to a completely different country because the British took over. And it wasn't even the British government that took over. It was a business called the East India Company. Now, my best analogy for this, my best way of explaining the East India Company is to ask you to imagine Tesco's. So big business, big company like Tesco's with the Tesco uniforms. Imagine them with guns and cannons. That's it, Tesco with guns. If you can imagine that Tesco decided that they wanted to go and conquer a country, yeah, so they sail ships, all with the Tesco logo on them, over to India. They jump off into India, they start trading with the people there, and over time, they gradually, sometimes through trading and buying and selling things, but sometimes through threatening people with their guns, they end up taking over bit after bit after bit. And India got eaten up in this way over quite a long time until a really big moment in 1757 when Robert Clive, this gentleman here, a cruel Robert Clive, some people are saying. Yes, if you know anything about Robert Clive, interesting man, a bit of a tearaway for sure. Someone who liked to be in the action, and someone who wasn't particularly friendly, shall we say? An interesting guy though, and there are statues of him around in the UK to commemorate his, I don't know, success in India. But he managed to fight a great battle, well, a number of great battles. But the biggest one was the Battle of Plassey in 1757. Here we've got an artist representation of him leading his armies against the rulers of India at that time, the rulers of this kingdom. You'll notice his army is made up of elephants. And these gentlemen here are what we would call sepoys, Indian soldiers, because although the company was taking over India, they were doing it mainly with Indian people, yeah, because they would get to India and they would have lots of money because they're a big company, and so they would give the Indians their East India Company uniforms, Tesco uniforms in our analogy, and then you'd have an Indian Tesco army with Indian Tesco elephants. I like it. And so Clive, he led his army against a much bigger Indian army and he won. And that meant that a huge part of the north of India became under British control. And that control just tightened. Eventually in the 1850s, 1852, 1854, there was a great big rebellion. The Indians had had enough of the British and they fought back. But the Indians were defeated. And Queen Victoria, about 20 years later, crowned herself Empress of India. And they took India away from the company, from the Tesco's with guns, and they made it part of the British Empire officially, which meant it was the biggest, richest part of the empire. Queen Victoria famously called it the jewel in the crown. In fact, she had a great big Indian jewel literally in her crown. So there you go. So Clive, he goes down in history as a bit of a loose cannon for sure, but he did manage to bring down an empire, which isn't bad for a guy who he started off life as a bit of a bully in school. If you look into his backstory, he ended up working as a pen pusher, just a clerk, and one day he decided he'd quite like to lead armies, please, and he did quite well at it, worryingly well for the poor Indians. But if we fast forward to 1947, 1947 sees Britain give India back to the Indians, but with a few tricky side of events happening here as well. So, we've got here. Let's start with this guy up here. Here we have Mahatma K. Gandhi, often known as the father of the Indian nation. Here's a better, but you can't really see his face in that one, can you? But here's a better one. So here's Gandhi. Gandhi was a Hindu who went to London when he was a young man and learnt to be a lawyer, so he could speak English and was a very intelligent man, quite well off. But as you can see, as he got older, he got rid of his lawyer's suits and his pretty hair and stuff, and started dressing more like a poor person. And he started to lead resistance against the British Empire. Now he's important because he didn't just lead resistance, but he led peaceful resistance. His philosophy was, we are going to fight back peacefully. Satyagraha, they called it. We will protest without hurting anyone. And so he would take his followers up against the British police or the British army, who would beat them with sticks or shoot them or trample them with horses, and never once would they fight back. Fingersnail asks, was he the one who did the Salt March? He is, and in fact this picture here is from the Salt March in 1930, I want to say 31, I think. He decides that he wants to protest against the British because the British say, you can only buy salt from us, and it's going to be expensive, and you've got to buy it from our shops with our British seal on it. You're not allowed to have your own salt. Now in India, along the coast, it's very easy to make your own salt. It's free. You go to the coast, you get a load of seawater, you leave it in the sun, the water goes away, you're left with a load of salt. Easy. Why should they be paying for it when they could just make their own? So Gandhi starts a long march all the way from his home. I think it's about 300 miles or so. It's a really long march. He sends this march. He starts with just him and a few friends, but by the time they get to the sea, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and they all converge on the beach and start making salt for free. The English come along, the British beat them up, take them all to jail, but the newspapers start to talk about it, and the British start to look silly. Now, if we fast forward to 1947. The man in charge of India at this point, Lord Mountbatten, he decided that he was going to leave. The British government by this point, World War II was over, and we had promised that we would leave if they help us in World War II, and India did. So in 1947, he decided to leave, but not simply. He said, right, I'm going to leave, but I don't want you guys fighting, you Muslims and you Hindus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split you into two countries. We're going to call one India. We're going to call the other one Pakistan. And I want all the Muslims to go up to Pakistan, please. And I want all the Hindus to come into India. Now, in the great big switcheroo, which we call partition, when Hindus in their millions started to leave what is now Pakistan to go down south, and millions of Muslims left India to go to what is now Pakistan, at least 1 million people died. Some estimates say 2 million people died. We're talking fighting in the streets, we're talking bandits, we're talking robbers, we're talking Hindus fighting Muslims, for no other reason than because they are different. And it caused absolute chaos. Now, part of the reason was because Mountbatten only gave them 6 weeks to sort this out and didn't quite draw the lines right. So they're still fighting in India today, up in Kashmir, over whether it belongs to India or Pakistan, or even China. I mean, there are arguments over Kashmir. In fact, today, right now, there are soldiers all over Kashmir who are fighting the highest war in the world because they're fighting in the mountains. Kind of cool, but also kind of weird. Anyway, we've run out of time. Thank you very much, everyone. I will see a lot of you tomorrow, hopefully, where we're going to look at some ancient British stuff. And come back on Friday, we're going to have a Greek myth about Perseus. Yes, that'll be good. All right. Thank you very much, guys. It's been wonderful, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.